Jackson School of International Studies at the University of Washington presents World Focus, a continuing series on international political, social, economic, and cultural issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hillel J. Keeval, Chairman of the Jewish Studies Program at the University of Washington. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 1986 Samuel and Althea Stroum Lectures in Jewish Studies. The Jewish Studies Program at the University of Washington, part of the Henry M. Jackson School of International Studies, offers a comprehensive program of instruction in Jewish history, religion, thought, language, and literature. In addition to offering an honors major, it mounts a series of courses which attract over 300 students each year. The Samuel and Althea Stroum Lectures in Jewish Studies were established by the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle in cooperation with the Jackson School to honor the efforts of Samuel and Althea Stroum on behalf of higher Jewish education and the university at large. The lectureship makes it possible to bring to our area outstanding scholars and interpreters of Jewish culture, promoting a deeper understanding of Jewish history, religion, and thought over the centuries and throughout the world. In past years, the lectureship has brought to the university such distinguished individuals as Irving Howe, Yehuda Bauer, Yosef Yerushalmi, Joseph Dahn, and Aharon Appelfeld. The University of Washington Press publishes a series of books based on the Stroum Lectures. Over the past few years, it has issued Yehuda Bauer's Holocaust in Historical Perspective, Yosef Dahn's Jewish Mysticism and Jewish Ethics, and Yosef Yerushalmi's Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory. This last book was awarded the National Jewish Book Award in History, and it recently was the subject of a day-long academic conference held at Boston University. This year's Stroum Lecturer is the world-renowned expert on Jewish folklore and ethnology, holder of the Max and Margareta Grunwald Chair in Jewish Folklore at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Professor Dov Noy. Dov Noy hails from Kolomea in Galician Poland, where he was born in 1920. He settled in Israel in 1938. He received his PhD in folklore, anthropology, and comparative literature from Indiana University. Professor Noy is the author of numerous books and articles, among them an index of Talmudic Midrashic literature, folk tales of Israel, Moroccan Jewish folk tales, and, of course, the long and important essay on folklore in the Encyclopedia Judaica. He is currently supervising a project dealing with the folk tales of Ethiopian Jews. In his third and final talk, Professor Noy examines the symbolic meanings that are attached to folk custom, folk belief, and behavior. The title of the third lecture is Jewish Symbolism. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to present to you Professor Dov Noy.
As you heard already, the subject of this third lecture in the series is about Jewish symbols. The general subject is folklore, Jewish folklore, and we defined it as the values, objects, creativity transmitted from generation to generation, mainly by oral tradition, and not normative, not compulsory. I was asked whether this tradition is religious, and Professor Henning Samsdorf who is at this university and a colleague in the realm of the study of folk literature, asked me this question. And I would like to make sure that the sources of many of the Jewish customs and stories and visual things go back to the Bible. But it doesn't mean that all these things are so-called religious. It depends upon the definition, whether you see in the Bible a book of literature or a book of divine revelation, and I am not going into this field. But at the moment I said that Jewish folklore is non-normative, it means that it is not the same as religion, because religion everywhere is normative, compulsory, as dictated or imposed by an elite, by a group of people that made these laws. And there is a difference between customs and laws, between a written, canonized text and a text orally transmitted from generation to generation. I would like to start with the definition of symbols. I have here too, just as with regard to folklore in general, a wide definition which is sometimes wider than the accepted definition. A symbol is a unit transferred from its basic, overt, universal dimension into another one. You have a very clear, a very universal dimension of sound, for example, or sight. I say yeah. I said yeah. This sound yeah is the same all over the world. You can record it. You can hear it again and again. But the moment you put it into some kind of a writing, in English you can write it this way, and it's a ya. The Pole will write it this way, and this is the same ya. The Russian will write it this way, and this is the same ya in the Cyrillic alphabet. The Hebrew will write it this way, and this ya. The Arab will write it this way, and it's ya. So these are symbols. These are symbols because the sound is the same, but the symbol is different. Excuse me. I thought always that my voice is strong enough. Okay, but not for the cameras. The same is true with sight. If you, and I brought already this example, and we can bring many examples of this thing. If we take a geometric figure like this, the people, most of the people, over 99% of the people in the world will say these are two triangles. One goes up and one goes down, because this is the overt dimension, the universal dimension, the clear dimension. But the moment there is a society that sees here something different, that these two triangles mean for them the Star of David or the Shield of David, at this moment it becomes a symbol. The transposition, the transformation from one dimension into the other dimension makes the thing into a symbol. It's similar because it means the same, but the interpretation, the inner side, the explanation, it makes this into a symbol. And in fact, just the same as we divided all the time the transmitted values and components of folklore in three groups, we can divide the symbols also into these three groups. So we have audio-oral symbols, like, for example, ya and ya, and then visual symbols like these, and like the Shield of David, and then cogitative symbols where you have some deed, a custom, but you transfer the meaning of this custom into the folk belief. And from the dimension of an act that you see how it is performed, a dynamic act, which is different from a static, unchanged visual thing, the moment you transfigure the deed into some belief and you explain it, the moment you are in the symbolic dimension. A lot of the culture of the people depends upon their symbolic life, upon their symbolic feelings, because this ya, for the same sound, ya, for an English ear means some kind of a yes. For a Polish ear, when he says ya, for him it means I. Ya in Polish is I, myself. The same in Russian. For the Hebrew ear, ya means the name of God, a very important word, very important two letters, and so on. So depends how the people hear things, depends how the people say things. And if you take modern ethnic studies, you will see that these cultural feelings, this self-identification, what you hear, what your group hears, what your group sees in the universal symbol, this makes the group into a cultural entity. This unites the group. It makes it Jewish, it makes it belonging to a neighborhood, it makes it belonging to a specific society, and so on. And therefore, if, for example, a sound which means, for example, a Bet Shalom or B'nai Torah, for 99% of the people in the world, it doesn't mean anything, because these are just sounds, it's a sound. But for the Hebrew people, it has some meaning. It means either, respectively, the house of peace, or it means the sons or the students of the Torah. And for people in Seattle, which is again another group, it can mean a congregation, a specific congregation by the name of Bet Shalom, or a temple by the name of B'nai Torah. So this makes the attitude towards a universal aspect, towards a universal unit. How you see it, what you feel, this makes it a symbol. In modern science, in modern humanities, only since perhaps 10, 15 years, there is a special field of studying symbols. And this field is called semiotics. In fact, the Hebrew and the Yiddish word for symbol goes back to the same root as symbol semiotics. It's called simen, siman, semen in Yiddish, in Ladino the same, and it means a sign, signum in Latin. So the study of these signs, which means something to specific people, is very important in the study of culture. We shall tonight deviate a little bit from our regular order. In the two first lectures, we referred according to some order to audio-oral, then to visual, then to cogitative folklore, tonight we shall change a little bit the order. We shall start with audio-oral, and we shall move to cogitative, bringing examples, and we shall end by visual because it's easier technically to show the slides at the end and to illustrate visual folklore this way. We should remember now, before we start the examples of audio-oral folklore, that we are, even if we do not feel, all of us are involved in some kind of symbols, changing the word into some visual expression. If we say in mathematics 5 plus 3, this sign is a symbol. It became an international symbol. The same with equal, and so on. In mysticism, in all mystical trends all over the world, in alchemistry, in all the sciences, you have symbols. In many religions, for example, this symbol, the triangle up, stands for man, the triangle down stands for woman, and this means complexity, union, and so on. So it depends how you look, how you study, and this is indeed now important as a specific field. Let us start with the audio-oral folklore. Here we come to the importance of the language, of the Hebrew language, of the Jewish languages. All of them, as some of you remember, are written in Hebrew characters. The Hebrew characters are very important. They are a must for a Jewish language. Be it Ladino, be it Aramaic, still used by the Kurdish Jews, be it Yiddish, Judeo-Arabic dialects, Judeo-Persian dialects, all of them, without exception, are written in Hebrew characters. And this is the most important factor in Jewish audio-oral symbolism. Usually, when we talk about symbolism, we think of what we call now visual symbolism. What does a bird mean? What does a golden peacock mean? A fish, a specific animal, a candlestick, things of this kind. But what I am trying to do is to expand these realms of symbolism and to include audio-oral and cogitative symbolism too. Now let us see some examples and how the letters are transposed. We should remember that the Jewish people, and all the time we are looking for some unique things, that the Jewish people until this day, they always have two languages. They live in two languages. One of them is the sacred language, which now recently has been made into a living official language of the State of Israel. It's Hebrew, but has always been, since the Bible, the sacred language of the Jewish prayers and of the Jewish Torah. And at the same time, the Jews had their own vernacular, their own language, very often even a third language, the language of the surrounding country. So they spoke in Turkey, let us say, Ladino, their folk vernacular, Turkish, because this was the language of the state, but in their prayers, and even as a component of their Ladino language, Judesmo or Judeo-Espanol, they had this component. They had the Hebrew component. And therefore, the passage from language to language is very important. We do not know of any folk culture, of the folk culture studied, even cultures that are created in a border area. the German-Polish border area, the Russian-Ukrainian border area, the Romanian-Hungarian border area, where you have bilinguality and bilingual songs. We don't know of so many songs and tales playing with two languages. Very often you have songs related in Yiddish, for example. Somebody goes and he hears a divine voice from heaven. And this divine voice is Katarina Maladica Padis Yuda. This is the divine voice. What is this? This is a Ukrainian folk song with a Ukrainian melody. And then he hears this voice. He lives, of course, in these other spheres, in spheres of divine voices. Maybe he doesn't understand Ukrainian at all. And then he asks himself, word by word, Katarina, Katarina, vos meint men dos. What is the meaning of this word? Katarina is the name of a girl, Catherine. And then he says, Kat, Kat, is doch Hakite, Rino, is doch Gesang. He explains all this sentence as Hebrew words, and it means Kat means a group, and Rina means a song, and Maladica, which means young maiden in Ukrainian, means full of joy, mole, dico, padiso, shaddai, which means come here, padis yuda. But he hears there, you have redeemed, you God Almighty, Shaddai, Shaddai, Shuda. And we have tens of instances of this kind, of bilingual songs. The same is true in Ladino, the same is true in Yiddish, the same is true with many languages, which means the folklore moves in two dimensions. Another way of different dimensions is not one language into another language, and we have Hebrew-Hungarian songs and Polish Yiddish songs and so on, but we have the letter and number dimension. Until this day, each letter of the Hebrew alphabet has its value. There are 22 letters, all of them are holy. God created the world by letters. The world was not created, as in surrounding cultures, by some kind of sexual act, as all the things created, but by letters, by this fiat, let it be creation, and the letters are very important. The letters have deeper meaning, and the text of the Torah can be studied in different ways according to the value, to the mathematical value of the letters and their combinations. And until this day, if a Jew donates in a synagogue some sum of money, he will not donate as usual around number 10 or 20, but he will donate 18, because 18 stands for life, chai. Or he will donate 17, because 17 stands for good, tov. And so you have these two dimensions. This passage from one dimension into another dimension makes this possible different ideas, bringing them back to the Hebrew alphabet. If you take an idea and you speculate and you prove how important it is, it doesn't catch the masses which are rooted in the Hebrew alphabet, and their ear is used to this symbolism. You have to find usually either a sentence in the Bible or some kind of a transposition in numbers. A transposition of this, the official name for it, this method is called gematria. Gematria, which doesn't go back to geometry, although it is a Greek component, but it goes back to this old equation because once it existed in Greece, to gamma tria. Gamma, the third letter of the Greek alphabet, corresponding to the third letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is equal to tria, the Greek 3. Now I shall bring a few comparisons to give you the indication of ideas that are not philosophical ideas, but they are folkloristic folk beliefs because of the value of the world. Let us take the idea of pantheism. The main exponent of it is the philosopher Spinoza, and this means that nature is God. Nature is God. There are many philosophical explanations and many philosophical treatises about this. But if you take again this gematria method, you find the equation God really equals the nature. Because if you take the value of the letters of Elohim, which stand for God, Elohim, you see that it's the same as Hateva 86. The letters, I'm not going into those who know Hebrew letters, will make this the mathematics. And I would like to bring a few other things that ideas are brought back to this method of symbolism. And then, of course, if you see the God's name, and you know the meaning, and you know the letters, and you can always work it in different ways, because you can make many, many combinations, infinite numbers of combinations, how the letters work and how the numbers work. Many Hebrew sayings, many Hebrew proverbs are explained in this way. If a difficulty arises, you can explain it using this method. For example, there is a saying, and I quote it in Hebrew and then I translate it into English, Derech Eretz Kadma LeTorah, which means fellowship or nice behavior or relationship between man and his fellow man is more important, antedates the Torah. This is very strange for a usual Hebrew ear that makes the Torah and puts the Torah on the second place after some kind of behavior. Historically, we know that all these sources were created during 1,000 years. There are the outcome of personal ideas, of ecology, of conditions in time and in space when these things were said. And you cannot take out a sentence of its context and to say, the Jewish sources say, the Jewish people say. Somebody, somewhere said so and so, and this is recorded. So I imagine that for somebody in some place, the relations between people were more important than observing the laws. There were people like this always. But you have to explain it. And then you find out that the word for this fellowship is equal in Hebrew. Derech Eretz equals tefillah, equals prayer. And then you say, you think that what's written here is right, fellowship is right. No, prayer is right, because the number of fellowship equals the number of prayer. 515, tefillah is 515, derech eretz is 515, and so you have many things of this kind. Not only this, the folk preachers, when they came in their sermons to the congregations and they wanted to pass an idea that catches, they had to use some kind of methods. When in the diaspora in Eastern Europe, when they started to talk about Hebrew language as the national language. After Ben Yehuda and the land of Israel revived it, the preachers used a very nice equation which got, because the word safa, language, means numerically the same as God's presence, Shekhinah. Shekhinah equals safa. So they had an idea. The language is as important as God's presence and so. And in many cases we have a list of over 1,000 equations which became folk equations. This is the second method. There are several methods, and they have many ramifications. I talked, for example, about songs in two languages. But there are other things that the language explains. Let us take a thing that didn't came up yet, this Helmite stories. Everybody knows that the jokes about stupid people are told about the people of a townlet in Poland called Chelm. Chelm. This is a real town. It's in Poland until this day. You will find it on the map. Why do people tell these stories about Chelm? These are internationally known stories with a Jewish oikotypification, with a Jewish flavor, but they are known. In Greece, you had a city by the name of Abdera, and you know about the wise men of Gotham, and so on. In the Jewish Spanish, the so-called Judesmo world, we have a place called Makeda, and the fools come from there. So why just Chelm? If we open the Encyclopedia Judaica, we see that Chelm is a city like all Jewish cities. It had rabbis, it had very important authors. There is nothing special about this city. But still, if you used to ask somebody, where are you from, and you saw that he blushed and didn't answer, you be sure that he is from Chelm, yes? Because it is some kind of a stigma. And the Poles, usually there is a connection between the surrounding culture and the Jewish culture. And Chelm is not known whatsoever in Polish folklore as a city of fools or a city that people joke about. Of course, you always have slurs. All the cities make some stories about the competing neighboring townlet or so on. But not to this extent, and you have in English translations of these Helmite stories. But if you remember that the Jewish ear, when it hears the word Helm, it doesn't explain this in the way of some kind of Polish etymology, of Polish linguistics, and this is some kind of errors or so. For a Hebrew ear, Helm is Helma, which means in Aramaic dream, a dream. This is a city of dreamers. This is a city of dreams. And in the Bible they said, dreams are foolish. Dreams tell are lying in the folk culture. This transposition from language to language. I want to, as I said, I want to bring a third method, just to keep this number 3 intact, and to mention a method which is called in Hebrew notarikon, notarikon, or notarikon. In fact, this is also a Roman Greek classic word, and the remnants of it are in notarius, notary in English. This was the man who used to take the protocol like shorthand nowadays in the Roman court, in notarikon, which means that if you have, and I mentioned it already, if you have a Hebrew word, and even a Yiddish word or a Ladino word, you can explain it according to the letters. Each letter creates a new word. And this is like in English, the acronym. And so if you see, or if you talk about the East, among Jewish customs is when you pray, you face the east. We talked about it when we talked about Jewish space. Then the east, which in Hebrew is composed of 4 letters, Mizrach. But you don't face always the east geographically, because if you live in Egypt, you face the north. And if you live in Syria, you face the west, and so on. Only the first people who left the land of Israel or were expelled and sent to Rome, for them, Israel was in the east. And then you have always the explanation on Jewish paper cuts or so, which is said from this side is the spirit of life. Completely different. It's not a geographical thing, because this has become a symbol. And it's not the literal meaning, but the symbolic meaning. Very often, customs are explained, which means you see somebody playing some kind of, with a toy on Hanukkah called dreidel. Or you see somebody shortly using a rattle or a bull roarer or some kind of a musical instrument. There are different definitions of a so-called grager. You rattle with it like this. You make a noise in the synagogue, in the holy synagogue. This is what you see. This is the deed. But if explained, if interpreted symbolically, then you go into another dimension. Then you understand that this noise comes to avert all the evil thoughts about doing harm to Jews, because you use this rattle only while reading the scroll of Esther and you hear the word Haman, who wanted to kill the Jews and so on. So it becomes very symbolical. The word Haman means contemporary anti-Semites. The rattle means the way of keeping them silent or avoiding them or averting the dangers and so on. And the same is true with the dreidel that you play on Hanukkah. You see children playing these things, and you wonder, why do they play just on Hanukkah? This is, by the way, the only night, the only time in the year where Jews have to play cards. They play cards. And you had Hebrew cards. And in the museums and in books, you can find Hebrew cards from 1 till 31, from Aleph until Lamet Aleph. And they used to produce these cards in a card factory in Vienna, in thousands and thousands, and we know the numbers because all the Hasidim and so on, they play on this in Hanukkah. And there are probably historical reasons for it, and this was the time you used the play, or you used this kind of dreidel to foretell the future at the beginning of the new year. It goes back to magic practices. But Jewish symbolism has this dreidel made with 4 sides. And you have there 4 letters. And these 4 letters are Nes, Gadol, Haya, Sham, which means a great miracle happened there. This is the miracle that the few Maccabees overcame the many Greeks. But if you take the letters and the value of these 4 letters, the same value as Messiah, as the 4 letters of Messiah. Which means, in the header, the rabbi says to the children, play, because if you play, you hasten the coming of the Messiah. Okay, modern interpretation says, if you remember, that a minority doesn't mean end of everything. You can win the battle. You can overcome the majority, just as the Maccabees did. So be strong. Think of values. Think of spiritual life, and so on. Then you will bring the Messiah. This is the Messiah. All these explanations go back to the symbolic value. All the ideas go back to the symbolic values. And the same is true with other deeds which belong to the cogitative, folk belief, and custom dimension. If you see a wedding and people have two candles, always they carry two candles, then it goes back again to the symbolism of the candle and to the value of the candle. And I said already that if you take the value of a light or a candle is the same word in the Jewish languages, then candle plus candle, candle is 250 plus 250, ner is 250, and this is equal to the first commandment of the Bible, multiply and be fertile, which is the reason why at the wedding you go with the bride and with the bridegroom and have always two candles. This is the symbolic dimension. The historical dimension can be different. You can explain in a different way. But the symbols, the transposition from one to the other, explaining things are the same if you take this word ner and then you explain it, soul, the N stands for neshama, soul, and the resh stands for ruach, spirit, which means if you look at the light, be it Friday night, be it on some other occasion, you think of two things according to the notarikon method. You think of the soul and you think of the spirit. And this gives the simple words another dimension, a symbolic dimension. I think I finished the two first aspects of folklore, and I would like to come now to the visual folklore illustrated by some slides. But before I come to this, I would like to make a few comments, a few general comments. And I shall also finish this and summarize after I show the slides and I annotate the slides. We in the humanities, not only in Jewish studies, somehow we feel inferior to the sciences. No parallel happening can be brought from the realm of humanities that somebody touches a button and reaches afterwards the moon. The way, the methods of sciences proved themselves in many, many areas of medicine, physics, chemistry, and so on. Not so philosophy, not so the study of history. We are doubtful whether it really improved mankind as much as it improved, let us say, surgery. But many methods from the sciences go in slowly into the humanities. Among them, classification, which I did and which you see here, an example in chemistry, and modeling. In fact, I used already this word previously, model. If we have a model and we have criteria, even in humanities, then we can judge and not rely in literature is bad or good according to our taste. Then we have some real scientific, I use it in quotation marks, scientific criteria. If I know that the triad is very important in folklore, according to my statistical findings of scientific samples, then I know that if a narrator, a storyteller, tells me, starts the story and says the princess was beautiful and good-hearted, he is not a good storyteller. And if a corresponding storyteller will tell me the princess is good-hearted, clever, and beautiful, then I see, yes, she told the story using a triad, using three adjectives for a princess, which means, according to the model, I judge. And when we talked about our time, the Jewish folklore in the future, in the past, in the present, I said we try to go through thousands and thousands of texts and to reach our conclusions, not just to have a final statement and summary, but in order when a text comes up, when something happens, that we have a criterion to judge. It fits the model, it's legitimate. It doesn't fit the model, something is wrong. It's outside the main category. And when we tried to discuss or to study the visual symbols, and this is a field, as I said, that was studied, that has been studied, unlike the two other symbolic dimensions, we can go through thousands and thousands of objects in museums where they have been assembled, in books of Jewish folk art, of Jewish ceremonial art, in catalogs of exhibitions, and take the single visual motifs and arrange them and see what's important, and again, make a list of priorities and find out what's the main motif, what's the second motif, and so on. We tried to work out a model like this, and already when we worked, we found out that the motif of a crown is overwhelming, which was very, very strange at the beginning. The Jews are not a monarchy, even if they speak about it, but the crown is so important. You have prayers starting crown. The Hebrew letters in Jewish calligraphy, in the Torah, the Hebrew traditional script, you add always, you have, for example, a letter like this, you always add some illumination, some ornament at the end, and this is called the crowns, tagim in Hebrew, crowns. And then you got as the King of Kings, and all the crown motif was very, very up. And we started to study the meaning and the symbol of the crown. And then we came across saying of, in the chapters of our fathers, the so-called Pirkei Avot, which is a very important Hebrew book. It was usually read on Saturdays in the afternoon in the synagogue, and people knew it by heart. These are sentences of wisdom, and we came across a saying which means there are 3 crowns, says Rabbi Shimon in chapter 4. The crown of the Torah, the crown of kingdom or of royalty, it's the same, and the crown of priesthood. Keter Torah in the original, Keter, the crown of Torah, Keter of the Malchut, of the kingdom, of the royalty, and the Keter of the priesthood, of Kihuna. And then we found out that we can classify all the symbols, all the Jewish symbols, according to these 3 crowns, where each crown is some kind of an entity, of a system, of a class by itself. Then Torah includes everything connected with the Hebrew letters the Torah is written in. with reading the Torah, with studying the Torah. This is one world, the whole world, one crown. The second crown, the crown of kingdom, is connected with the coming of the Messiah, which will be the king, with the future, with the far future. It's connected with the emblem of Judah, two lions. Lions were the symbol of Judah, and the lions are the kingdom, the crown of the kingdom. The world to come, which is the same as the ancient Garden of Eden, where animals lived together without devouring each other, where a sheep will be with the lion and was with the wolf and the lion in the ancient times. All this Garden of Eden of the past, the world to come in the future, this Jewish past and the Jewish future, all this belongs to the kingdom, with King Judah, who is the father of the Messiah. And the third one is the crown of priesthood. And this goes back to the Temple of Jerusalem, to the two pillars which were at the entrance to the temple, to the different vessels used by the priests, to the blessing of the priests who used to bless this way, like this, the people in the temple, to the picture of Jerusalem, and so on. Hillel Rassali Shalmati. Hillel.